from a Preceon perspective, again, my guess would be there's going to be areas that maybe adopt 80% short corn, right? That there's going to be areas, depending on the layout of the land, that are 50-50, right? But I think at the end of the day, it's going to be the catalyst for higher level conversations regarding crop production. Mic drop.
John?
Yeah, mic drop.
Mic drop. There you go. Welcome to Around the Farm, the podcast about all things ag. I'm your host, Tom Versman, and with me, as always, is Andy Folta.
Happy to be here, Tom.
Always happy to be
Today we have
with
a
you.
really exciting podcast because we're talking all things traits, systems, and digital.
Everything. And you know what? It's kind of like podcasts are colliding in the universe with our guests today. But before we introduce them, I actually want to give a shout out to Jenna and Mary Pat from Beyond the Crops. I just did a podcast with them, and we'll link that in the description below, but talking about FieldView, and had a really good time hanging out with them the other day.
Just like a lot of media franchises, we're doing crossover events.
Crossover
right? You just had one, and now we've got another one here today.
That's right. So let's introduce our guest, Andy.
Yeah. So let's kick it over to the great state of Iowa, I believe, with our friends from A Penny for Your Thoughts. Sean, Andrew, you want to introduce yourselves?
How we doing, boys? Looking forward to this big crossover event. I was telling the boys earlier as we were prepping for this big event, I remember as a kid, my favorite show is having these crossover events. Now we're doing this great podcast crossover, so I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, looking forward
That's
to joining you guys. Thanks for having us on today.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Sean, Andrew, do you all want to unpack a little bit about what you do up in Iowa, who you work for and what your all's roles are?
Yeah, absolutely. It's really cool to sit here today with you guys. I would be a fifth generation family farmer in central Iowa. Was one of the lucky people who got to take the reins of a DeKalb dealership that was started in 1989. And so
awesome.
We're
Good
kind
year.
of to give a location, we're right outside of the Farm Progress Show site. And then over the last 5 or 6 years, have gotten to build a good friendship and relationship with Andrew, who has taught us and a lot about agriculture. And so that led us to starting a podcast a couple years ago.
Yeah, that's a whole nother story. It's actually pretty interesting how we got started, and it's always fun to see where you are and where you came from, because our very first piece of equipment that we recorded our show on, just this little globe, and it looks like something from 25 years ago. But no, I'm Andrew Penney. Live here in Ames, Iowa. I am the agronomy lead for Preceon. Previously a DeKalb Asgrow TA, and so my role is kind of teaching and educating our dealers, growers, and even internals about some of the management practices that we're going to need, not just with short corn but tall corn in general, to kind of bring us into the next era of yield potential.
Absolutely. And I'd like to think our viewers have been asking for this.
I think they have.
They have. They have wanted this conversation to happen. And maybe it's just us, but hey, I'd like to think they were thinking.
Hey, I know that my dad is an avid listener, and he's been asking for this one for quite a while.
Yeah,
so we're making Jerry
just
happy.
our number one fan.
Yep.
Mr.
He's
Fulton.
that one guy.
Yeah.
Every episode.
I love it.
And I appreciate that. I'm waiting for him to leave us a comment.
Yeah. Where's a penny for your thoughts?
Yep. So guys, let's unpack a little more on a penny for your thoughts. You guys have been doing this now, how long? A couple years, you said, Andrew? And you guys really do tell great stories and walk folks through what's happening on farm. I tell you, I've learned personally, not growing up on a farm, listening to some of your all's episodes, I've actually learned quite a bit.
Yeah,
too.
it's a great amount of information, and you'll have two different formats. So kind of unpack what people can learn from your all's podcast.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And I'll take one of the things Andrew and I try and do is express a lot of gratitude for the people that come on. But to get to tell this story, I think is actually fun, thinking about the evolution of Andrew's role, both within Bayer, but on our podcast. So when Andrew was hired as a DeKalb TA, I remember our first meeting, and he said, "What do you guys need to be successful in your business?" And I just said, simply put, we just are not agronomically sound enough to be great partners with our customers. So we were doing a really good job servicing and selling products, but we were not doing a great job of helping our customers think agronomically. And what I learned about Andrew really quickly was he's an excellent teacher. And he's a humble and kind teacher. And I think some of what we run into in agronomy is just people want to cling to the knowledge they have rather than share it freely. And so over a year or two, I think I would walk away from Andrew and I being in the field and him teaching me, and I'd go, man, if I need to know that, odds are a lot of people need to know that. And so asked him if we could do some sort of a recording. And we did. We'll pull the little disc out so you guys can see the disc, but did a recording. And then we really quickly realized we don't know enough. Andrew has really done a brilliant job of tapping into his network. If you really think about the people that are doing hard work in the sciences, a lot of them are at universities, land-grant universities, etc. So our goal is to find basically the best authority on whatever topic we're going to cover. High yield management,
Fred Bilo,
diseases. Yeah, I mean, but really go straight to where the hard work is being done. And then we break those episodes apart into science, so understanding the topic, and then management, so we understand what to do with that agronomically on the farm.
Yeah, no, well said. It comes down to, I think one of the cool things I've got to see as agronomy and crop production has evolved, and it kind of reminds me of back when I was at Iowa State. So I taught an agronomy class at Iowa State, and I remember 15 to 20 years ago when crop production and agronomy was not that cool of a thing to be in. And I got to witness kind of this transition, and I'm still seeing it to this day. More people from town wanting to learn about crop production and agronomy. More females coming into wanting to learn about agronomy and crop production, and it's just really cool to see it kind of be this cool thing, and people just having this great thirst for knowledge and the science behind a lot of what we do. And that wasn't always the case, right? And so it's really cool to be a part of helping people understand all the science that goes into producing a bushel of corn. All the knowledge that it takes to go from 250 bushel to 350 bushel, right? And so this podcast is a really good way to help educate people that are wanting this knowledge and all this information in the background. And it's a cool way to connect the professors that are doing the research and are the experts to all the listeners that we have across the U.S.
I love that, Penney, that you actually got to teach in college, and specifically agriculture. That doesn't surprise me, actually. I didn't know that about you, but I think you'd be a heck of a teacher. I learn from you every time we chit-chat too, especially in your new role focusing on Preceon. That's always been exciting to just kind of hear your thoughts. And I mean, man, with the innovation coming and what we're doing and the excitement, I mean, you need that creative mindset, but also that grounded mindset too from an education perspective. And that's one thing I love about you, and I think it's been fun to learn from you too. So that excites me about today.
Yeah, I think it's something really unique that you guys do is not just help educate your local area. I think we have a really good field staff in Bayer that helps to do that locally, but you all do that at a bigger scale. And it's nice that we have, 2 podcasts, one where you can go learn something with Sean and Andrew, and then one where you can
have a little fun.
Who knows what you can do with us? And not to flex on you too much, Penny, but I was not the main teacher, but I was a TA for some plant science classes at Mizzou.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it was floral design, but
floral design.
It was. Yeah.
Sean, what about you? What was your journey like a little bit?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. For me, getting to be in agriculture, we filmed almost like a little commercial, I guess, down the road in a waterway. And I got asked a question, what drives my passion? And as I was standing there, there's cameras, and I can see my grandparents' house, kind of in the distance, and then my parents' house that I live in now. And I started thinking about how unique and lucky any of us are to get to literally steward a part of the earth, right? And so it's like you have this, by nothing other than sheer luck, the opportunity to take care of something that's so unbelievably critical to our daily caloric need, but also just sustainability and real stewardship over generations. And I'm lucky because my family has been so intentional at bringing the next generation in and giving them a lot of opportunities. And so, for me, my passion isn't necessarily specifically row crop farming. I think it's coming alongside of agriculture and saying, how do we make sure we're doing this the absolute best way possible to meet the demand that we have today, but then also just thinking, what's the impact of the decisions we make today long-term? And that's really what I think has driven Andrew and I's passion is, we like going out and digging in the soil and learning what's going on, but we also spend a lot of time kind of philosophizing? That's not a word.
We'll make it a word.
I like that word.
I don't think that's a word.
Yeah.
Philosophically discussing just
what a recovery.
Just the way to the way to think about this stuff, because we get to influence in very small incremental ways, the way people think about something that could have a really significant impact on the road. And that's what gets me passionate enough to get up in the morning and do the granular work we have to do on a day-to-day basis. But then really, we put a lot of effort and energy into stuff like this because I think it's part of something much more important than just this year's planting or this year's harvest.
For sure. And you go ahead.
I think that's something really cool that you all bring together as a combination. You have that, generational perspective, like you talked about, living in your parents' house, seeing your grandparents' house on a piece of ground that's been in your family for years, and then combining that, deep agronomic insight that Penney can bring along with the perspective that you have as both a farmer and a dealer, which is one that's becoming more and more recognized as being impactful in how successful farmers are. We had a Channel Seed Pro on a couple months ago, but now having, a DeKalb Asgrow dealer to come in and talk about the influence that you have on the decisions that farmers make, it's a really key piece of the farmer's journey.
Absolutely. And Sean, you said something that actually gave me goosebumps. It's kind of embarrassing to admit, but I really liked it. Steward a part of the earth. Thought that's you need to put that somewhere.
There's his shirt.
That should be a t-shirt.
Yeah.
I like that. I think that's just really neat how you positioned, your passion and how grateful you are to have the ability to do that. So yeah, you touched on the DeKalb dealership.
Yeah.
Sean, what do you want to share about that? How's that been going? And
I started in 2010 is the first year that I ran the business. So this is my 15th year. Was around it, throughout my entire childhood. The brand has meant a lot to me because it's obviously been a part of my family's foundation. Talking about how's it gone recently, we've been in a real sweet spot for a few years. So the derecho in 2020 certainly was a challenge for us, but the subsequent years after that, the county that our main office is in has been one of the best yielding counties in the state of Iowa. And really going back to like 2018, 2019, when Andrew and I started working together, we've just completely shifted our focus to agronomics. And so what's cool is when you start to shift your agronomic practices and then you pair it with the types of products that we're lucky enough to offer, you get to see some really special things. And I know the ag economy has some challenges right now. I know that we're all going through challenges, but certainly for our business, it kind of feels like we're in a garden spot and we've got just an amazing customer base that is really responsive to trying to do it better and push the envelope. And so, we're having a wield time out here.
That's awesome. That's great to hear. And I mean, I think all of us probably hear more about the challenges, right? It's part of our day-to-day job and how we help our customers. But it is refreshing to hear some of the positives that are happening out in the countryside too. And those are always the stories you want to share as well.
Yeah, 100%. And thinking about a positive, what more positive thing to start talking about than the new system of Preceon, right?
That's right. Which Penney,
Always fun.
Shoot, when I first met you, I didn't know you were even an agronomist. I was just, he's the Preceon guy. That's just kind of how I was more or less told.
It's funny I took this role, and I always joke with like Scott, who's my boss and leads corn for North America, and some of the other people on the corn team. I was doing so much with the Preceon team before I even took this role, just because the relation and the conversations around higher level management, higher yield expectations, all that. So it's been fun to try, basically kind of lay the foundation on how we not only start talking about short corn, but also tall corn, right? We're in this new era, and I know Sean had a really good quote at one point. We're kind of with the products coming out of our breeding program, breeding 3.0, as we advance into precision breeding. These products that Channel and DeKalb have access to, we're often giving growers horsepower they're not yet ready to handle, right? And so we have a lot of growers that are just so used to doing things the same way the last 20 years. And I feel so fortunate to have this role to travel the U.S. and talk to growers about higher level management. I can sit down with any grower and increase yield or increase ROI. And so as we have these products where we're advancing that yield potential, it's going to take new management practices. It's going to take things that people aren't used to doing. And so I feel extremely fortunate getting to travel the U.S. and talk about that stuff.
Penney, when you're thinking about Preceon, let's just kind of jump into, how do you view Preceon being a component of this broader system, the system selling approach that we've kind of been slowly talking about. I think more and more is going to come, which is what makes it cool. But what's your 30,000 foot view of this bear system selling?
Yeah, the way I view it, I mean, we have all these acronyms, right? And you hear about this PAY acronym, the protection from the wind, access, peace, and yield potential. And it's always funny when you start looking at acronyms, you can kind of shrug them off. But in all reality, it's a critical component. And I really feel like the whole, all these conversations that we're having around Preceon, it is going to be the catalyst to driving the conversation in all of our corn products, right? And so when we start thinking about all of the different management practices that we can start adding into our corn production with short corn, now you don't have to own a Hagie sprayer, right? You can have a John Deere sprayer, you can have a Case sprayer. You can now put your own fungicide application on. You can now go in at V8, tassel, make your own side dress application. So it's going to unlock all these opportunities for growers to see how they can increase ROI or increase yield on their field. I think Preceon is really in corn production. I think it's bigger than just short corn, right? Again, I think it's going to be the catalyst for growers to just be able to see what they can do on their farm in terms of increasing yield or increasing ROI. And they're going to take some of these practices into their tall corn as well.
Yeah, it's a really interesting one, to me. I think for a long time, people have thought about increasing yield, and that's always a goal, right? But in, today's environment, increasing ROI is really something that's incredibly important. And while Preceon, it might not be on every acre this year or next year, it's definitely a breeding ground for where you can go and learn about how you can improve ROI or even yield across your acres. And I like that analogy of, taking what you learn in the short corn and then applying it to the tall corn.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think the really cool thing with that, Folta, we're in an era where very, very few people know where their food comes from, right? Everybody wants to know and think that their food is coming from a sustainable source, right? And so the really cool thing about this, we can increase, having these conversations around short corn and these different management practices, we can increase yield, we can increase ROI, but at the end of the day, we're also benefiting the environment. Split applications of numerous different nutrients is hugely beneficial to the environment. So I think it really unlocks, from a business perspective, from a grower dealer perspective, it unlocks just a whole lot of different conversations that's all positive.
100%. Sean, from your perspective too, working directly with the farmer, being a farmer yourself, how have you viewed Preceon? How have you viewed kind of what you've been hearing about the system approach? What's been your take?
We got to start pretty early, which was really special. So we got to see, 2022
or 2023. Yeah. Well, 2022. Yeah.
We got to start early. And the thing that was impressive right away was the very first year, we didn't really do much from a management standpoint. We just kind of said, okay, let's go out and make sure that the product is going to do what, live up to the yield claim, right? And so really enjoyed that process. I think we might have played with population a little bit, but otherwise just kind of left it as is to see how it would stand up. And the yield was parity or better. I think that year it was close to the top product on our farm, which is pretty cool. So you think about the amount of time it takes to have these breeding lines catch up. So that was impressive. Since then, I think the cool part is we're really trying to develop the idea of kind of leading by example, right? If we're going to sit here and talk about this stuff, then we need to implement those practices. And so I think for us to have access to it, both within our dealership, but also on our family farm, really we have to take serious the same challenge that Andrew's trying to get people to think through, which is what have you done historically? And then what things can you manipulate within your management, whether it's ROI focused, which years like this are probably pretty ROI driven, or chasing yield. And for us, it's been a great way to just challenge our thinking, because it's one thing to sit here and have these conversations, and then another thing to actually go out and make those changes on your farm. So we've had a great experience, and I think for us, being able to kind of be on the leading or even bleeding edge a little bit is pretty neat.
Yeah, that's pretty cool that you have the opportunity to experience it and then tell the story to your customers as well.
Yeah, and it reminds me, we have my sister on who works for Bayer at Chesterfield as a gene editor, and she talked about how the stuff that she's working on is 10 to 15 years away from being seen in a commercial ag field. And how exciting is it that you all have been working with it for several years, and now more and more people are getting access to it, and it's something that is tangible, that's coming out to the market really soon.
Yeah, and just speaking of genetics, it is amazing how, and I loved having your sister on podcast, but it is amazing how
About to get insulted.
She is a little bit more professional.
Yeah. That's what we put.
And how you can talk as much as you can.
Yeah.
Genetics are a wild thing.
They truly are. On another topic, so
it's
so
like
Sean,
looking at a
I'm
corn
thinking-
hybrid. You have the same parent.
Yeah.
You might have the same male or female, but how much different those hybrids can be, right?
That's right.
Just wildly different. But so, I'm thinking about the Preceon, system, and I think of it really a lot as an experience. And so, Sean, you talked about from the grower perspective. Now, take your grower hat off and put your dealer, your advisor hat back on. Where do you see yourself as a dealer plugging into that system or that experience, and how do you see, that changing the way that you do business with your customers?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I remember Andrew and I were at one of the Preceon events, and it was kind of like a light bulb went off for me how critical of a moment in time this is. And the team that was smart enough to say, hey, let's not just throw a product into the market that has a different attribute. Let's use it as a moment in time to recognize where we're at in agriculture, I think is so critical. Because to Andrew's point, the management decisions that we need to make those in tall corn too, right? I mean, we have got to change the way that we approach efficiency, but these products, I think, give people in my position a great opportunity to facilitate that conversation because it's a relatively difficult thing to get access to these products. And it puts us in a position where we can say, okay, Mr. Grower, if you want to participate in this, we're going to challenge you to benefit from the attributes, but also then look at your own practices and say, what things can we adjust on your farm? And my assumption is over a pretty short period of time, we're going to experience benefits from changing our practices. And to Andrew's point, we're going to incorporate those. But I've got to get a lot of kudos to the team that put this plan together because we would have, I think, just missed a golden opportunity to challenge ourselves if we would have just handed the bags out and said, go plant short-statured hybrids. We're having some of the best conversations we've ever had because of the fact that we have the ability to go interact with that crop in a unique way.
The really cool thing is I don't think it's any secret. Seed is kind of relationship business, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think and kind of why Bayer is kind of taking the approach now that taking what we've learned with short corn, implementing that conversation into tall corn. I mean, when you start having these conversations with the customer, with the dealer, your relationship level increases, and so it's stuff like that helps you weather the storm on a rough year, but also just continue to drive that relationship and think long term versus year to year. So I think not only are we benefiting the grower and the dealer, I think it also benefits Bayer, right? Because we're building stronger relationships and building that trust with the dealer and grower.
Yeah, that relationship is so important. And I forget who said it, but I was at a research farm in central Illinois, and someone wanted to bring us to reality about Preceon, and they said, guys, it's corn that's short. It's the system around it and the experience that it's delivering that's really the innovative part of the experience.
100%.
I'm sure that was like
Sean,
Socrates or Voltaire or someone.
Maybe yeah. Well, it definitely wasn't Andy Folta.
You could have just taken claim for it.
I should.
Sean, you mentioned it too. A lot of the practices, a lot of the different management tools or practices as well. Going into Preceon are probably transferable to traditional corn. And I mean, would you say an opinion or some guidance even would be, you could basically have the full-blown Preceon experience without Preceon today as we're still learning, but it's good to get ahead and experience some of those changes.
The really neat part about that is the evolution of the conversation kind of went from the super obvious, which was, I can spray my own fungicide, right? I can maybe run my own side dress application to it's really quickly evolved to like deep science around, okay, how should we be thinking about these management practices on our farm? So yeah, you can absolutely have that experience. I do think that what makes Preceon really unique versus tall corn, we know so much about populations and hybrids and, the 30-inch row, 36,000 tall hybrids, that's a very mature market. The cool thing to me about getting in early on the Preceon experience, they've used this term over and over again, test and learn, which I really like because the reality is we're asking our customers to be part of the research department within Bayer, right? Let's go out and let's do this stuff together. And there's just so many things we don't understand today that we're getting to learn alongside of farmers and growers and dealers. And that's a pretty special thing to be a part of. And I really enjoy that.
One thing that I really take away from the system experience that makes Preceon unrecreatable is that it does have a digital component, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
And I think that's where, FieldView's been coming into play, which has been pretty neat to see and see that evolution. I mean, you and I we've been around FieldView a long time.
Yeah.
And this is one of the first times, at least for me, that I truly feel like we're almost becoming the app that comes with Preceon, which is pretty neat. And that's a fun story to start to tell. But
hence the partnership.
Fellas, partnership. That's right.
Absolutely.
Just like today.
Exactly. Just the cross collab.
The cross collaboration.
Yeah. But I look at, the different stages of innovation that our company's gone through.
Yep.
And I came into Monsanto at the time along with the same year of the purchase of Climate FieldView. And so I feel a little bit of ownership because we were launching that and scaling that in the marketplace. And now we're coming into this next step of Preceon being the flagship innovation, and FieldView's a part of that. So, could you all talk about kind of how you all have used, FieldView digital tools as a whole to, connect with customers or enhance your business, Sean, things along those lines?
Yeah, I'm really appreciative of the intentionality that Bayer has put together the plan around Preceon, because for us, the evolution of our relationship with climate has been interesting to say the least. So there certainly was a time where it had a pretty significant impact in helping us grow our business. And I would say, you think about 10, 12 years ago when we were kind of in the first stages of really data collection and evaluating that stuff. And then it seems like we went through a season where it was just kind of like hit the snooze button, man. Like nobody really cared. And it was kind of like, whatever. Like I know the data's there, but I'm not making decisions off of it. And then it kind of comes full circle right now. So the question we always have to ask ourselves is, it doesn't really matter how much knowledge a guy like Andrew has if we can't execute an idea on our farm and then query the results of that, right? But at the end of the day, it's either going to have an impact on my farm that impacts ROI or a yield goal, or it's not. And I've got to have the ability to really understand that data. And that term test and learn comes back up. It feels like we're on the forefront right now of really kind of opening Pandora's box of what all can we try? What all can we understand? I went to breakfast with a customer this morning. We spent an hour and a half talking about the economic challenges of agriculture right now. And how do you make decisions to understand, am I using the right amount of nitrogen? Am I using the right amount of fertilizer? When I'm applying it, am I doing it right? And all of those things, I think, specifically thinking about the Preceon system, we're doing a really good job because we're kind of forcing growers into the funnel and saying, hey, let's actually go learn this stuff so we don't just simply focus on the attribute of the product.
Yeah, no, and from a science nerd, I mean, thinking about how climate, FieldView Cab has changed the way we do research and look at hybrids products. It's just absolutely changed the game. I can still remember doing research where you would have to get a weigh wagon out and just hope that you would fit all of your corn on that weigh wagon, right? And so now I can think back, fast forward to when I was at Iowa State doing research. You can calibrate a combine to be extremely accurate, right? Once you take out all the different seed sizes and stuff that might impact, that yield map. And so it's really become a way that we can talk about all the stuff like Sean said, but also help a grower quantify that and actually visually see that on his farm. And so it continues to change the game and thinking about some of the stuff that we're doing in the future to better that that software. It's going to continue to change the game in the way we have conversations with growers and dealers.
Andrew and I had the opportunity to interview a bunch of guys that were really doing high yield management and recognized for that. And one of the things that I took away from the time that we spent interviewing NCGA winners was their commitment and passion for lifelong learning. And I think when you think about the FieldView platform and using that technology, to me, it's literally that simple. If you desire to learn something, you have to have a conduit to learn that. And to me, that's really what it provides for us. Just yesterday, I was scouting fields where some things had gone really well and some things had gone poorly. But because we have that technology, we have the ability to later on go back and ask the right questions to help educate us. And so I think that concept of lifelong learning is really important. And then you have to have something to facilitate the understanding of what it is that you're trying to learn.
If set up properly, it's kind of given everybody the opportunity and the ability to be a scientist, right? We can look at and create these trials on our farm, get replicated data across an entire field, multiple fields. So it's just really opened the window and changed the way we talk about products, hybrids, all the fun stuff in crop production.
I've been thinking more about this recently, and you just, again, being a 5th generation farmer on your farm, and you think about all the things that you're going to do in your lifetime, all the things you're going to learn, like you said, just some of these guys being lifelong learners. When you started taking over the operation, what were you handed, right? Were you handed, here's your instruction manual, go, right? I assume it wasn't that simple, but, with FieldView and your family and your kids too, it's like, hey, here is something that, here's all the things we tried. Here's everything we did. Technology is going to advance. You can build upon that and try something, hey, that may lead to another 50 bushel, which would be amazing. 50 bushel on the farm would be incredible. Who knows where it'll go. But just was curious what your thoughts there on kind of that succession planning as you think of your family even too, right? Like, how do you set them up for success with all the fun stuff that you've been able to do so far?
You guys can't see this, but above you, there's a picture of my grandfather and my dad both holding a soybean plant. So my mind goes to really what has been generationally passed down. There's 2 things. I don't think we've done this on air yet, but we keep talking about like these funny shirts we want to make. And I was just thinking one of the quotes need to be, I tried that in the 70s, right? Because how often do we hear that, right? I mean, the old guy on the farm is always like, no, we did that back in the day and that just doesn't work, right?
It didn't work.
And so, what have we been passed on? Thinking about, Bayer, unequivocally the largest investment in innovation in agriculture. And then you think the natural progression on a family farm is I do the thing the generation before me did. And so we're really guilty, I think, of seeing this division in agriculture where you have companies like Bayer pouring all of their resources into changing and learning and growing and innovating. And then a lot of times our farms just get really static, right? We do what grandpa did because that's what dad did. So that's what I will do. And, when I came back to the farm in the early 2000s, this technology didn't really exist, right? So there was no manual that got handed off. I think, my sons are 9 and 11. Today they'll know, at a very, very granular level, everything we've done on the farm since the day they were born, right? I mean, they'll know the direction the tractor was going and the amount of fuel it was consuming as it was making that pass. And so they're certainly going to have a significantly deeper peek into the choices we've made and how those impacted our farm.
Yeah, that's going to ramp up the ability that we have to continue to test and learn and to improve. And I think, I had a son that was just born. He's probably had more pictures taken of him in the 2 months of his life than I had of my entire childhood. I look at the same thing with, data points that we have and what your sons are going to have access to. But I'm also reminded, we went down to that, the Groundbreaker event, the Preceon Groundbreaker event in Arizona. And I know you all were there and interviewed a lot of Bayer leaders like Brian Neighbor, Jeremy Williams, and Tom Eichhoff for your all's podcast, which I would highly encourage people to listen to.
Definitely, 100%.
But we had a breakout, and it was myself and Aaron Ray, another Iowa guy, talking about. Shout out to Aaron Ray.
Big fan of Aaron Ray.
Friend of the program.
Friend of the program.
We talked about how you can use, FieldView or digital platforms to continue to test and learn, because there are a lot of these, conventions that we have about agriculture of you need to put this much, whatever product down this time of year. But Aaron's question to the people was, do you? And you can use FieldView as a way to learn what works on your operation 1 year to the next. And what I was really encouraged by was a lot of farmers were coming up, and they weren't even coming up and saying, I learned this on FieldView. They just were saying, I learned this, and FieldView was the platform, whatever digital tool it was, they have access to this information so that they can continue to test and iterate and develop. And that's a great thing that digital tools bring, but also things like Preceon to challenge people to have that question in their mind.
There's not a single person on the planet that has more intuition about their field than the farmer, right? I mean, they're the most creative problem solver and have the most intimate relationship with their crop in that soil. No one can replicate that. We certainly can't do it. And so I think by, having the tension or the paradigm in that relationship where you have, the innovation that's being driven by Bayer, but then you have the end user participating in that research. I mean, they oftentimes are the driver behind the best questions being asked, the best way to test it, and really, frankly, just the reality of the situation, right? So we utilize Andrew to say, hey, here's things you should think about, but then it's really up to the grower to say, I'm actually going to go
actually
make
try
those,
it.
execute that,
Yeah,
and in a way that's actually something we can learn from in real world settings.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm just curious, and maybe I'll start with you. I don't know if I've ever asked you this, and then we'll ask Sean and Andrew too. What is your favorite digital feature on FieldView?
Okay, well, it's, and I will be the first one to admit, it's a little bit buried. You do have to do a little bit of clicking to get to it, but it's historical weather.
Historical weather.
Because I worked with and I know this is a DeKalb podcast today, but I worked with a Channel Seed Pro in Illinois who had a customer that came to him and he had recommended one hybrid on the field. The next year he recommended another hybrid and it looked like it just tanked that year. But we went through the historical weather and we showed that if you looked at the rains that we got the first year, it was just the perfect, most timely rains right when you wanted them. And if you looked at the current year, it was just run through the ringer of what it got. It looked like it got the same amount of rain, but throughout the season, it got it at the wrong times. And we were able to go in and you could set your date ranges and you would see, the overall accumulation, but also the individual rain events.
Yeah.
So that's one that I really enjoy. Yeah.
Definitely. Sean, what's yours? As a DeKalb, maybe put your DeKalb dealer hat on for this one. What is something that's just invaluable to you?
For us, it's absolutely having the ability to be so intimately intertwined with our growers. So understand what they're doing, when they're doing it, how they did it. Our role is to be agronomic advisors, right? The product is relatively insignificant. It's how do we interact with it in real time. So we spend a lot of our time, you get a phone call, hey, I'm worried about this, or I'm wondering about this, or I want to know more about this. And for us, the access to their information when you really truly have a partnership with the grower is just almost impossible to place a correct value on. It's amazing that you can be flying down the road in your pickup truck and know, okay, what was the planting date? What was the hybrid? To your point, the weather. I just think having that intimate knowledge of what's going on, and then the ability to replicate yourself across a lot of relationships, right? You think back in the day where you had a white binder for every customer and all that data versus just being able to pull it up on the phone.
It's funny when you think about that. I still remember doing those white binders, having to memorize all that, pull it out when you have a conversation with growers. But bar none, mine is just the tracking capabilities for sure. I mean, thinking about all these different management practices, starter fertilizer, fungicide applications, side dressing nitrogen, and then just hybrids alone. I mean, that has just changed the way I look at information like that and have those conversations. I think kind of tying into what you all are talking about kids and stuff, it's going to change. It changed the way we talk about products in hybrids. And it's like pre-Roundup versus Roundup babies, or, people born after Roundup and before Roundup. That there's going to be a generation where, you got before climate, after climate. And they're born into this, this era of, hey, this is what we have, and this is how we talk about it, versus people that still remember how it used to be with binders and everything. But yeah, bar none, just the tracking capabilities and the way it's changed the conversation with the growers and dealers.
I'd say mine, still to this day, is the ability to throw a globe on any piece of equipment and create a map.
Oh yeah,
just the drive map anything component. I had a lot of Kinsey planters that I worked with that were ground driven, and it was pretty neat to show guys their first ever planting map that they ever had seen, because they weren't going to put the dollars into the planter necessarily at that point. It was a smaller operation, and you throw a couple $100 globe on top, an iPad in there, and you connect it with some wires just kind of hanging out the side of the cab. It was pretty cool.
There is a YouTube video. You'd have to find it somewhere and dig it up from Southern Illinois of a single row plow being pulled by a mule.
There was.
That's mapping on FieldView.
I actually did one to show it off. I actually threw my globe on my truck, and I went and showed that I could plant a cul-de-sac here in St. Louis County.
How'd it do?
hey, it yielded pretty darn good.
Okay,
It's
good.
concrete.
Yeah.
It's funny you bring that up, Tom, because our last guest on our episode was a professor from the Ohio State University, and the episode was on soil compaction. One of our initial questions at the beginning of the show is, what gets you excited about ag? And he brought up just the technology advancements, and so he got his PhD in precision technology and crop production. And he brought up the globe thing and just how you go back, I don't know, 15 years, give or take 20 years. Our main concern was connecting to GPS and getting that figured out. Whereas now we just get on our iPads and iPhones and tractors, and everything's just connected. That's nothing we worry about nowadays. But just the changes we've seen in the last 15 years, it's incredible.
I guess, on kind of that same point, and, I think, kind of coming to the end of the conversation, thinking about the next 10 to 15 years, or even shorter than that, I'd love to get a take from both of you from the Preceon Smart Corn system over the next, 5-10 years. What do you hope that customers take away from it, aside from obviously ROI and yield?
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing, as I think about, we don't know what this looks like in 5 to 10 years, right? We don't know what the percentage of tall corn to short corn is going to be in 5 to 10 years. But when I think about all the awesome conversations I've had with growers that want to push yield, that want to get better, I think it's going to help us get to the point where we have growers thinking about doing things differently, and thinking about doing more precise nutrient applications. And just really utilizing the technology that we have now, along with the technology that we have coming down the pipeline, both in we'll say breeding, but also climate and some of those capabilities, and using that and actually using it to their advantage in doing things differently with the help of all this technology, right? And that's where I really see this taking us and going. So from a Preceon perspective, again, my guess would be there's going to be areas that maybe adopt 80% short corn, right? That there's going to be areas, depending on the layout of the land, that are 50-50, right? But I think at the end of the day, it's going to be the catalyst for higher level conversations regarding crop production. Mic drop.
John?
Yeah, mic drop.
Mic drop. There you go.
The problem when your co-host is Andrew, it's hard to follow him up sometimes. But
Yeah, he kind of took that from you.
I think about a guy by the name of Temple.
Temple Rhodes.
Temple Rhodes. We interviewed him at Commodity Classic, and he farms in the Chesapeake Bay, and the regulations in the Chesapeake Bay are, wild as far as nutrient management. And what I walked away with after that interview was they're 20 some years ahead of us in understanding their soil, understanding nutrient concentration, timing of application. And then you think if you'd snap your fingers and Preceon goes away, what would be motivating us right now to have these higher level conversations and think differently? Andrew mentioned earlier that we're at a kind of a new precipice for yield. So to a certain extent, we're being led down a path by the higher yield potential that exists in these products. But again, I just go back to the design of this Preceon program. I think is so valuable because it's creating excitement around having a completely different level conversation with growers. I echo everything that Andrew said. The cool part to me will be if in 5 or 10 years we look back and we kind of earmark that 2022, 2023 timeframe as a thought leadership shift, both within our business but within agriculture. And there's 2 components that I'm really excited about. One is continuing to drive food security through yield and production, right? But Andrew hit earlier on the idea of stewardship in the environment. We've got to be mindful of the choices we make. And I think that Preceon is a catalyst for having those conversations that ultimately are going to result in stewardship and a very mindful nature to the way that we approach these cropping systems. And so, hopefully we look back and this is an earmarked time when we started thinking about those things in a different way.
Well, hey, for better or for worse, we can stake a flag in the ground today with this episode, and we at least have we have a timestamp for this, and you guys too, right? On things you've talked about. But can I share mine? You think?
Please.
I
very interested in what you have to say, Versman.
Yeah, Bachelor of Science from the University of Missouri. Very. I think I think the thing for me that excites me the most, and really when I look at Preceon and I look at FieldView and even the conversation today, I mean, we're just listening to Sean and Andrew talk. We're scratching the surface. I mean, this thing's just begun, and we're talking about system farming, and maybe we're just talking about 2 pieces of that system. But imagine when we have 6 or 7 different ways to control what's happening on the farm throughout the year, right? I feel like that's the opportunity. Today we're talking about hybrids, we're talking about digital, but when we can start thinking in those chunks of the seasons, I think that's going to be that next bushel, and that's what excites me.
Yeah, and for me, I think the 4 of us have had some experiences with Preceon. I know, Sean, you and Penney, you all have had probably the most from testing it for, several years. But I think a lot of people that are, listening or seeing this haven't seen Preceon in the wild. And this is going to be their first experience with it, this year, maybe even next year. And the things we're going to learn over the next 5 years from all the things we learned in the last 5 years are going to take us into a whole new generation of ag production.
That's
well
right.
said.
Well, guys, is there anything else that we haven't touched on that you'd want to share or want to touch on, or anything? Andy, you might have something.
I do have a call out for because a lot of our, we have a YouTube channel, but a lot of our, subscribers do listen on Apple Podcasts. But I would highly encourage everyone to go and listen to the Our 2 Cents episode that you all have from A Penny for Your Thoughts from the Preceon Groundbreaker event in Arizona. I know I called it out earlier, but you all had some really good Bayer leaders come in and talk about the systems approach, all things Preceon and the future. But if people wanted to learn a little bit more about A Penny for Your Thoughts, where should they go?
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate that. So social media, A Penny podcast, Apple and Spotify. Appreciate the call out for the R2 Cents. I think the Bayer leadership episode from that year-end event was one of my favorites.
Oh yeah, by far.
If you're listening today and you haven't spent time around or had exposure to some of the people you mentioned earlier, just spectacular human beings with a really unique perspective. And I know for me, I walked away going, holy cow, I'm really glad we get to be a part of this. And that team of people is having a massive impact on both what we're doing locally, but global food production. So yeah, I appreciate that. But yeah, give us, check us out.
Search A Penny, Penney.
That's right.
Otherwise, it won't come up. You'll have other oddball Penny for Your Thoughts podcast.
A whole bunch of people listen to like a crappy economic podcast.
But Penney, right?
Yep.
That's key.
Yep,
absolutely.
Not the Penny Financial podcast.
That's right.
There you go.
Screw those guys.
yeah. Like the pasta with a Y.
Pasta.
I always say J.C. Penney, like J.C. Penney. Or Penney.
You understand. Almost no one will understand that reference. Like that's like a Kmart
the elders.
Yeah, Kmart.
Yeah,
the elders will.
It's like spelled like Sears.
Yeah. For those who know what a VHS is, you'll appreciate that call out.
That's hilarious.
Well, no, it's been fun. I appreciate the time. It's always fun talking about this stuff. The crossovers is a cool idea, been fun, but I think more importantly, the conversation, helping people think differently, challenge the way we've been doing things in the hopes that we can increase, and have a better experience with our growers and dealers.
Well, hey, this has been Around the Farm, the podcast about all things ag. You can subscribe wherever you get podcasts. Same with Penny for Your Thoughts. Keep an eye out for them too, and Our 2 Cents. Definitely keep an eye out and subscribe and listen to their content as well. Very helpful for both Andy and I, and we
insightful.
Absolutely, we love listening in. And again, Around the Farm, you can get us anywhere you get podcasts, and we'll see y'all next time Around the Farm.